we pulled out some things that he had said, and these were designed to be on the inflammatory side, the thing that might give them pause, are more likely to say it made them more likely to support than less.
Yes.
And I think this is part of what's happening here that Democrats can't fathom. They can't wrap their mind around it, so they dismiss it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Focus Group podcast. I'm Sarah Longwell, publisher of The Bulwark, and we are here to guide you through the beginning of real voting in this presidential primary, which begins in Iowa, which could end up being the first and last state that matters in this presidential primary, but we shall see. Now, people who are looking for an optimistic case for a non-Trump candidate will tell you something like this. Sure, the national polls show a massive lead for Trump, but it's a little narrower in early states. Sometimes I'm one of these people. Trump is leading by 52 points in the national Real Clear Politics average as of this taping. But if you zoom into Iowa, home of the first in the nation caucuses, Trump is leading by only 33 points. So that is the hopeful part. My guest today is a living legend in the state of Iowa and in our Office of Political Nerds, J. Ann Selzer, president of the polling firm Selzer and Company, who is most well known for conducting the Des Moines Register's Iowa poll, which is the gold standard in Iowa. Ann, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
Oh my gosh, you have no idea how bad I'm going to fangirl throughout this podcast. I hope you don't get embarrassed easily. And I want to start with so you watched the focus group. Because you're a quant person, right? You are the most rightist, best at it quant person out there. And I remember like when your polls come out, like lots of polls come out about Iowa, but everybody's like, but I need to see what the Selzer poll says because that's going to be the right one. First of all, my first question is like, why are you the rightist? Why do you do such a good job?
Well, I give credit to my methodology, which has served me well. And the basis of it is to try to adhere as much as I can to traditional science. And that the idea that I don't try to make any assumptions about what the future electorate might look like. Because in social science, we say that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior, but the Selzer caveat is until there's change. And so a lot of pollsters model a likely voter or a likely caucus goer based on what's happened in the past. And I don't do that. I do I take my very best shot at trying to reach every potential likely caucus goer without excluding anyone from that. It makes it very expensive to do, but it enables me to see change when it happens.
Are you aware of the power of your polling? I mean, because when it comes out, because the thing about polls is that they shape the narrative. And so do you feel an enormous sense of power?
I wouldn't say that my sensation of it is enormous sense of power. I would say it's a responsibility. And I'm also just very cognizant. I'm just going to take my best shot. And someday it might not work out. And I'm prepared for that. You have to have a little self conversations about what happens if.
Yeah. Well, I got to say, right before Bill Kristol walked into my office and I was like, oh, I'm about to do the podcast with Ann Selzer, which I'm super excited about. And he was like, oh, could you ask her? What I just need is for Nikki Haley to beat Ron DeSantis by about 6 points. And so I was quite certain that's not a thing that you can just do.
If I were to do it, it would require millions and millions of dollars because that's the last poll I'm going to do.
Right. That's right. Not a great ask. So a more serious, the quant versus qual. So I'm a qual person. I don't do polling. I invite pollsters on sometimes. When you watched the focus groups, having done so much polling of these voters, do you already watch a lot of focus groups, or did you feel like you got something new from listening to these voters work through how they think about the primary?
Well, first of all, I do focus groups. And so I'm not just strictly a quant person. I'm I find it, in fact, we're recruiting some right now that will happen later. But what I find interesting is listening to people think their way through things. So, and better understanding how they have arrived at the positions that they come to. I think in the group that I watched of Iowans, I think what was most striking was the comfort that they had in saying things that in mixed company, and by that I mean a mixed partisan group, might not have been said or might have been reacted to very differently. So it gives you a little bit of a glimpse into not just the person, but the community in which the person lives. And I think that's really helpful.
So do you So do you do it that way? Do you do it with people who all voted the same way, or do you mix them up?
Especially with political things. And so I did a fair amount of work for an environmental policy group that wanted to understand how Republicans think about environmental issues. And I would begin the group by saying, you have some things in common. First of all, I want you all to know that you voted for Donald Trump in the last election. And then there's like a sigh of relief. Like they think, okay, I don't have to fight. I'm not going to be in a fight.
And this is the entire thing. I try to explain this to people all the time. They're like, well, why don't you push back? Why don't you fight? Why don't you put people in the groups who are going to tell them the truth? And I was like, no. The best way to do a political focus group, I think especially with the Republicans, is to let them know it's a safe space. And that when that sigh of relief, it's exactly what happens. They realize they're in, and they're only going to tell you the truth when they feel like they're around other people who understand, because they do feel judged for things like voting for Trump. And so they don't like to admit it in mixed company or talk about it somewhat differently, depending on what kind of person they are.
Right. And then as a moderator, I might say, okay, Josie, I'm gonna push back on you a little bit, and then I can take the role of it, and obviously I have different techniques for that than another participant might have. But if there are particular things I want to know about, and I let them know I'm going to do that. So
how'd you think our moderator did?
I think our moderator did great.
Our the one that did it for us?
Yeah. I thought she was very good. And I thought there was an easygoingness that, again, I think invites people to feel comfortable. And that's the most important thing.
It's the ball game. I love talking about this with you. Okay. So in one interview that you gave recently, you mentioned that the ghost of Rick Santorum whispers in your ear to never say never. So what happened as you pulled the storied Rick Santorum comeback? And are you sort of leaving the door open for something similar in this race?
Well, this was 2012. And to say it was a comeback for Rick Santorum is denying the poll reality, which was in every poll we had conducted, and there were, a handful of them. It wasn't dozens and dozens, but he was polling at 4%, 5%, maybe 6%, and yet he wasn't dropping out. And so we're very well aware of it. The day after our first night of interviewing, my initial reaction to the horse race was, my gosh, Rick Santorum is in double digits. And it was 10% or 11%. But the next day it was more, and the next day it was more, and the next day it was more. And the average across those 4 days was just 15%. So he didn't really, on average, challenge, but the trajectory was such that became the story in the Register's write-up of it, that Ron Paul was falling, and I'm not going to remember who else, that Mitt Romney was sort of holding, but here came Santorum to be a challenger. And the funny thing was that we went down, this is very early on the Saturday morning that they're writing the story, and I brought that chart showing the trajectory, and the editor's face, I thought he'd kind of light up like, wow, this is a great story. And his face fell because they'd already done the artwork for the front page, and it did not have Rick Santorum. The lesson for me is that was not a good surprise. Try not to surprise your editor.
Well, so I guess, do you see the potential for that? I mean, so Nikki, let's say, I guess the story of Nikki Haley right now is one of modest surging, right?
Not in our polling.
Not in your polling.
Well, and that was the way that our December poll upended the conventional wisdom that Nikki Haley was a rocket ship on the launch pad ready to go, and we showed no movement, and we saw a drop in enthusiasm for her. So I think that's one of the things I'm really looking for in this next poll is who is showing positive movement, if any.
We can get into that deeper because I have some thoughts on that. But in our focus groups, I want to get to some of the sound. All but one of the people in our most recent Iowa focus group, the one that you watched, said they'd support Trump if the caucuses were today. So everybody did except for one woman. So we'll talk about some of the other candidates, but let's listen to how people talk about Trump. Because some of these people, they were just chugging the MAGA Kool-Aid, but some of them sort of did see his flaws, but still saw no reason to abandon him. Let's listen.
I don't like necessarily how he can sometimes like speak to people or treat people or how he can be in that way. But again, at the end of the day, it's about the president, not a popularity contest. And it comes down to who's going to take care of the country the best way.
I just know what Trump offered when he was there last time, and I know we will get the same thing. If I could have the perfect candidate, I'd surely vote for them, but he isn't coming back yet. So when he comes back, all will be set right. But until then, I'll take Trump and what he has to offer.
This is going to sound bad, but I do like Trump bullying people. And, because you are actually bringing out flaws in other people. And a lot of the learning process is like painful.
For everybody who plans on turning out for Trump in a couple weeks, is there anything that could change your mind at this point?
No.
Oh, yeah.
He's the best man for the job. He's already proved it.
Or anything extreme, like he died convicted of murder or something like that.
I don't see anybody else that just doesn't hold a candle to Trump.
So murder was the line. That was where people drew it. If he murders somebody in the next few days, they might change their mind to somebody else. So look, you talked about your recent poll, and in that Trump was leading by 32 points in December. So he was at 51%, and then DeSantis was at 19. Nikki was, like you said, holding steady at 16, and Vivek was at 5. And Trump also had the highest percentage of extremely enthusiastic supporters. So 45% compared to 16% for DeSantis and 21% for Haley. So Trump lost the Iowa caucuses in 2016. And as the campaigning started for this cycle back in, say, January and February of 2023, did you expect Trump to consolidate support to this degree? Like, how does this caucus stack up against others you've seen? Is this unprecedented, or is this a trajectory you've seen before?
Well, he is not the first candidate to crack the 50% mark, but those happened earlier in the cycle. This is the latest any candidate has done that, and that's typically been in a field that wasn't very big. So I think that this is unusual. I give credit to a major overhaul of the Trump campaign, that in 2016, it was an amateur effort. I don't think that the candidate was taking the Iowa caucuses very seriously, and he didn't have seasoned campaign staffers. So our poll showed him, our final poll had him in the lead. And I said, this caucus is Trump's to lose. Well, lose it he did, because the campaign had not organized for a caucus where they're designed for things to happen in the room. On caucus night, things can change, and they did. And the Ted Cruz campaign were well aware of what happens in those rooms and had precinct captains everywhere and somebody to stand up and speak for the candidate. And that didn't happen on the Trump side. So there were lots of other things going on there. And now I'm aware that the Trump campaign has precinct captains in all nearly 1,700 precincts. They've got special caps for them to wear, and they've been through training.
Are they red and say "Make America Great Again" on them?
Sorry?
Are they red and say "Make America Great Again" on them?
They're gold.
Oh, okay.
So they will stand out from other Trump hats.
Great. Okay. Of course they're gold. Of course they're gold. Okay. Well, so when I talk about how much Republican voters loved Trump presidency and how they don't see much of a reason to move off of them, which is exactly what we heard from this group. The biggest thing people ask me is, but Sarah, how can they still be with him after January 6th? And I really wish that this wasn't the case, but they talk about how January 6th wasn't Trump's fault. So let's listen to how these Iowa voters talk about that.
Basically, what it comes down to is Trump versus the deep state.
Right.
And by the deep state, I'm talking about Klaus Schwab, talking about George Soros. And they have plants in there like Ray Epps, who was in that whole J6 crowd, inciting the whole thing. It adds up to where it's just really rotten tomatoes in there. It's bad.
I don't think that he is the sole reason as to why this occurred. I mean, I use kid analogies a lot, but for those of you that have children, you ever put one excited child in a room with kids who are maybe just kind of neutral? All of them get excited. All of them get rowdy. And I feel like that was probably kind of a similar chain of events that happened. No, I don't think that he was up there using code words to say like, all right, team, time to attack. He's a businessman. He's successful and he's been doing this for a long time. And there's a reason why.
It was a bad thing that happened, but I don't think it was Trump's fault. From all the news footage that I saw and all the interviews and stuff, even on the day of when Trump was giving his speech and everything, he was very adamant that people remain peaceful.
So this is really consistent for me with what I hear from Republican voters all the time, right? They don't think January 6th was Trump's fault. But I guess I'm curious for you, not just the January 6th piece, but in general, how much people love Trump, how deep their relationship goes with him, how they're not moving off from him. When you do focus groups, did this sound representative? Because I think it sounds like you do more. This is the second Iowa group I've done. I did one in person with Judy Woodruff for PBS. But does this sound like how voters you listen to all the time talk about Trump?
Well, not only yes to that question, but in our December poll, we pulled out some things that he had said with quotation marks around them that the listener, the respondent, couldn't see. But we wanted to be very careful in quoting things he had said or things that he said he would do. And for most of the items that we tested, we said, well, does this make, and these were designed to be on the inflammatory side, the thing that might give them pause, are more likely to say it made them more likely to support than less. Yes. And I think this is part of what's happening here that Democrats can't fathom. They can't wrap their mind around it, so they dismiss it. And yet the data suggests that all of these things that are happening and all of these things that he is saying is drumming up more support rather than tamping down support.
And I guess it's drumming up more support and also sort of deepening existing support. Because I'm interested, actually, now I'm going to go way off script, but I don't know if when you were doing focus groups and or polling sort of early on, if you saw the same thing I did. Because in early 2023, there was a real opening for a non-Trump candidate. And as I was seeing, like I saw a lot of sort of DeSantis curious voters. I thought that the group of sort of move on from Trump voters was like a real thing that could be worked with and built upon. And I think maybe it was a mixture of the lack of quality of the opposing candidates, but also there's just some depth to the relationship with Trump. Like they voted for him twice. They seem to know what they're getting, right? They talked about that in the group. Like he's a known quantity. I like his positions on. This is another thing when you talk about what liberals don't understand. These voters think Trump did a good job, right? Like everyone else thinks he did, but tell me for you, how have you seen the relationship with Trump change where that seemed like maybe somebody else could get some traction and then that just didn't happen?
Well, there probably are 100 reasons why that happened. And maybe some of it is the initial failure to go all in Iowa. So it takes a consistent and well-planned and funded effort, not as expensive as it would be if you were going to Michigan or Florida to start, but it still is an opportunity there. What I've seen is that the non-Trump candidates are mostly having their gatherings at the fabled Pizza Ranch chain or in somebody's living room, or, they're not big groups, or maybe 40 people. And Trump will come in and do a rally with 5,000, 7,000 more people, and they're very well organized in terms of getting commitment cards and giving instructions. for what these people are to do to go and get more people. So there's just, what I used to say is that it's not that hard to win the Iowa caucuses. You need to go find 40,000 people, and 30,000 haven't been to caucus before. And that's not that high a bar to be able to do it. Well, the person that is doing that is Donald Trump. Because, people said that he had all the votes he was going to get. And that's not true. And he didn't take that as true and did invest. And there's energy behind all of that. So it's partly what the contenders were up to, their unwillingness, certainly initially, to make a persuasive case that Trump needed to not be reelected. You've got Chris Christie who is doing that, but he's not campaigning in Iowa. But you have to hand it to the Trump campaign and their commitment to, they don't want to just win. They want to blow it out.
Yeah. Yeah, they want this to be I was for TV. Somebody was like, Trump is deploying surrogates to Iowa. Is he worried about a Nikki surge? And I was like, no, he wants to just like end this thing in Iowa. He would be such a dominating performance that like everybody just drops out dead, that it's over, scorched earth. But can I ask you just on this point about organization? Because I totally agree with the point you've been making, like Susie Wiles, Chris LaCivita, I object to them morally, but like they know what they're doing. Sure. And they're running a very sophisticated campaign this time. But DeSantis had a ton of money, had this vaunted strategy, of going everywhere. He's done the full Grassley and all that. But, your point, because a bunch of people have asked me this, that isn't the point of Iowa supposed to be that they have to do the pizza shop thing? They have to do the living room thing. Like, it seems like people are mad that Trump isn't doing that and is still being so successful because that's what you're supposed to be doing. But instead, by sheer volume, because in that focus group, one of the women was like, well, my kid went to his, it didn't sound like a bunch of them had met the other candidates, but at least one, like they'd been to the rallies, some of them been to the rallies. And so by sheer volume, Trump is touching more people than the others.
Yeah, I think that's right. I can't confirm that I've seen numbers on it, but it seems possible, and that they end up being televised. There's not a camera crew at the pizza ranch, right. So there are ways to watch those rallies, even if you're not in attendance. And I think this part is also not understood so well, which is that Trump, for his supporters, he makes politics fun. Yeah. It's entertaining. You go to the rally, you don't know what he's going to say. You're probably going to like it. It's probably going to make you laugh. There might be things that make you a little uncomfortable, but that's part of the show. So he has reinvented how to do politics, even that translate to a grassroots level without doing grassroots.
Yeah. And so you just, the rules that you think people try to apply to Iowa, because they still do this where it's like, well, you got to go. And everybody tries to make the Iowa quaintness, like the news. They're like, and we stand on this place with this famous shot. So does Trump just thrown all of that out? Like, is it feel like there's like an Earth 2 primary where people are trying to do the Iowa thing and then Trump's over here just doing the Trump thing and the Trump thing's winning?
Well, we'll see next week. There's always a little bit of a different temperature in Iowa at very final week leading up to the caucuses, because something is about to happen that people have been planning for and thinking about and making all their preparations. And sometimes I say it's you step outside, and there's almost like a pulse. You can almost feel there's something coming. I haven't really felt that, and I paid loose attention to signals of how the campaigns are doing. I only know where one headquarters is in Des Moines, and it's Vivek Ramaswamy. I've only seen 7 yard signs. One is for DeSantis, and the other 6 were in front of Ramaswamy's headquarters. So there's a lot of things happening that are not visible.
Yeah.
And that's just a change of technology from, even 2016, that so much as invisible to an observer unless you're part of the clan.
Yeah, that makes total sense. All right, well, let's talk about what these voters think of the other candidates, because these people, they already like Trump a lot. And it was going to take a pretty great candidate to move them away from him. And so Nikki Haley's been getting a lot of media attention lately, including for a comment at an event in New Hampshire where she couldn't say if slavery was the cause of the Civil War. So let's listen to one woman's reaction to that, followed by some of the more ambivalent reactions to Nikki in general.
I don't remember exactly what she said. The explanation that she made seemed to make sense and reasonable. I think maybe it was blown out of proportion. I'm not really sure. But overall, like, I'm not like so mad about it that I'm like, okay, I'm not interested in her anymore.
They will have more control over her than they would over somebody like Trump.
I don't not like her. That's kind of like my best way to say it, is that I don't not like her. To be honest with you, I need to probably do more research on her. I have heard her speak. I don't hate it. Is she maybe as strong, though, to lead our country? No. If she was interviewing for a position at my company, would I hire her? Yes. Do you see what I mean? So she's not quite, feel like, at that level of strength that we definitely need.
She's not a business woman.
She's not, right? She's not.
And that's what I like about Trump. I was a Ross Perot voter as well, because I wanted a businessman. What was that, 20 years ago? And was sad when he didn't make it in. I just think we need a business person to clean up this mess that we've got going on with finances and just everything. And a politician isn't going to do that.
I really honestly thought Ron DeSantis would do better. And then like Nikki Haley, I think, is a good option. Those are kind of the two for me. But I honestly don't think they have a chance against Trump. So like I said, I think then that's where you end up voting for Trump. I mean, obviously, I think he did a good job. Yeah, he is a personality. He is a character.
So that last woman is the only person in the group who said she was leaning toward a non-Trump candidate. But she still conceded that she would probably vote for Trump. And so Nikki has this 59-31 favorable, unfavorable split in your December poll. But that breaks down as 20% very favorable and 39% mostly favorable. That's a lot of people who don't not like her, right? It's like, so part of the mystique that states like Iowa and New Hampshire have is that the voters are hyper engaged. But these voters, they like don't seem to care quite as much that like there were debates coming up and they still feel like they need to do more research. And these are all people who plan a caucus. So like, when you say like there's usually a pulse and now you don't feel it, and I understand you said technology, but is some of it, what I was hearing in this group is it's just like the fait accompli of all of it. They're just like, it's going to be Trump. We're all going to go caucus for Trump and like whatever. Is that what's happening? Yeah.
Maybe. And in addition, in that poll, and it looks like you have the numbers in front of you, we asked about how enthusiastic you are about your first choice vote. And DeSantis dropped a bit in the top box, which is extremely enthusiastic. Haley dropped from the top two boxes to the bottom two boxes, mildly enthusiastic. Her percentage grew 20 percentage points. So this is a shift from more enthusiastic than not down to mildly enthusiastic. And again, that was another sort of failure to launch metric from my view, which is she had people talking her up. And then what happened? It just, they cooled on her.
And is that just a product? I mean, because here's one of my theories of things, which is she got the front runner treatment, right? Like when you get the front runner treatment, you get scrutiny, but also because these other candidates are all fighting for second place, right? They're not going after Trump. They're going after each other. And so basically what they're doing is neither of them, nobody's really rising a ton. They're actually just driving down each other's favorables, right? And so like, there's no way for anybody to get traction because all they're doing is hurting each other mutually. Like the ads that are on the air from Nikki are after DeSantis, and DeSantis is going after Nikki. Nobody's going after the front runner who's over 50%. Like, what is this madness? Explain it to me.
Well, they're sinking all boats except for the biggest, the Titanic. And that's not to say that he's unsinkable, but like the Titanic. I think they are of the idea that they need to persuade people who are for Trump to not be for Trump. And I've said from the beginning, that's misguided because his supporters are so locked in. Twice as many of his supporters say They're not going to change their mind. So there's not opportunity to persuade. The opportunity is to expand the number of people who come to caucus. And people don't realize how few people come to caucus. So it was 180,000 roughly in 2016, but that was an increase of 50% from the previous caucus from 2012. So there are opportunities for inflows of new caucus goers that you don't have to persuade them to not like Trump. You just need to identify that, and you have to think there are 30,000 of those that are out there. You just have to find them.
You know, maybe I asked this before, and maybe I didn't either let you answer or it was mixed up with something else. But like, DeSantis had all the money. He's got this vaunted ground game. Like, isn't that what they're supposed to be doing? Or are you just being too nice to not criticize the DeSantis field team and the consultants? But like, that was their one job, right? Was to expand the electorate to go get people to be for DeSantis. Now,
right.
are you still sitting there being like, that could happen? These people could they could turn up and they're not showing up in the polling? Or do you think that just didn't happen?
I had a TV crew from Miami in my office last week, maybe the week before. So it must have been the week before, saying that they heard the DeSantis campaign was going to knock on 1 million doors in Iowa. Okay, first of all, that's a jaw-dropping number. Mm-hmm. And I looked a little, I raised an eyebrow or both eyebrows, and he said, you're skeptical. I said, well, there are 2.1 million roughly registered voters in Iowa. So first of all, that's a big number. And so I don't know how you do that. Secondly, how are you deploying the resources? If he's got all this money, how are you spending it to get that kind of organization? Because I would think if that's happening, I would see it. You couldn't miss that kind of massive event. So then I had to wonder, what are they counting as a door knock? Because is that a touch? Is that a social media outreach? Is that an email that comes? Things that would be
invisible. Did they mean a contact as opposed to like physically showing up at a door?
Or if they knock 3 times, is that 3? I mean, I don't know. And I could be proven wrong, but I don't see how it's possible to knock on 1 million doors in Iowa.
That is all right, well, let's talk about DeSantis a little bit. So let's talk about how the voters talked about DeSantis, because that last woman there said she was disappointed by Ron DeSantis. And so, he was the great anti-Trump hope a year ago. But the way that people were talking about him in this group, it was like a shell of what they used to say about him. And it's like some people still like him. So like you said in your Iowa poll, he had 66 to 29 fave on fave among likely Republican caucus goers. So that's good. Those are good favorable numbers. But again, only 42% were mostly favorable and 24% were very favorable. So this is a number you had off the top of your head that I had somebody put together for me to show the decline of intensity in people. So some people have even though seen DeSantis in their churches, but it felt like a death rattle for his campaign listening to them. Let's listen.
He was America's governor, and Ron DeSantis was an excellent governor. And if he would have just bided his time, 2028 would have been his time to get in. But I think he jumped the gun here. He got in too quick. And when you're standing on a stage with 6 or 7 other candidates and a question is asked, and you look around to see whose hand is up, and then you put your hand up, he's not a decision maker. He was in the Navy. He was a JAG. He was basically a lawyer. He was not in a command position. And, I applaud him for serving his country. But he's not a decision maker on that level.
I think he did a good job in Florida with COVID. So I really think that's why he kind of stood out as being the leading candidate. But then I think clearly a lot of people must not care for him because he's not doing very well. So I do think that has made me think, well, okay, so he's probably not going to be the candidate.
He just asked our pastor, hey, I'm going to be in Iowa. I just want to come to a church service. Can I come to your church? And that's what he did. And so for me, the reason I like DeSantis is I do know he's a Christian. Just knowing that he's a Christian and knowing, like, I personally do want a guy that is in the office to be a Christian too. That's where I'm like not against him, but I also don't know if he's completely ready yet for this election.
Does it kind of feel in a sense that he just kind of gave up? So I'm like, why would I want to consider somebody that I feel like has already kind of given up before the race has even really started?
Well, if I was down 50 points, I'd be a little depressed as well.
Maybe.
And why am I spending all this money? But you see all of his lobbyists, the people that are shoveling, wheelbarrow loads of money towards him. What are they thinking?
It was interesting listening to them. I mean, they were kind of savage on DeSantis in an understated way by saying he seems depressed. He seems like he gave up. He's, came and nobody paid that much attention to him. What do you make of the DeSantis just campaign in general?
Well, I think they gave us several sides of it. That there was that initial likability in terms, or maybe better word is fit, to people who didn't think Donald Trump would be able to garner the kind of support that he had as president, and that the next best thing. And this was sort of the DeSantis theory of the case, which is, I'm the next best thing because look, I'm from Florida. Trump is from Florida now. And my policies, I agree with what Trump did in office, and I can watch my mouth. And so you should like me because the Trump train is headed nowhere. Well, then the Trump train wasn't headed nowhere, as it turns out. And that the DeSantis reaction to it wasn't to try to derail it. It was to just try to shout louder that, look at me, look at me, look at me. And then, that wears you out. So I don't disagree with that sort of, maybe they've given up. I look to what the candidates are doing between now and the caucuses as all in. And that I think you'll see enthusiasm. I don't think you'll see a depressed candidate in any engagement. So that kind of thing can kind of take hold late.
Yeah. DeSantis got that endorsement from Kim Reynolds, right? That was important. And he also got that guy, Bob Vanderplatz, who's very important there in Iowa, the local evangelical leader. That hasn't seemed to move the needle with voters in these groups. And I got to say, so Santorum and Cruz both won with Vanderplatz on their teams. But when I was in Iowa, the last time I was there with doing the things for PBS, they loved Kim Reynolds. The voters, the GOP voters in my groups, I did a couple of them, loved Kim Reynolds. And do you think it hurts? Like, why hasn't it helped DeSantis more that Kim Reynolds endorsed him? And do you actually think it's a drag on Kim Reynolds that she didn't endorse Trump?
Yeah, I don't have any polling data yet to say whether that's a drag. I think I was surprised that she decided to endorse at all. And then once she decided, because that's a calculated risk, what exactly is the upside? There's only an upside if the one she endorses wins. Mm-hmm. And then that's a different political future for her, perhaps. But I think that I'd asked a question or heard the question asked of Doug Gross, who's a political kingmaker somewhat. I mean, he's knowledgeable about all of this. Like, why did she endorse? He said, well, the last time I looked, politicians have egos. And so she felt she would be powerful enough that she could help her friend, Ron DeSantis. And it didn't make a whit of difference that we can tell. Maybe he was up 3 percentage points from October, so maybe, but I don't know yet if she's going to feel the downside of that, but it didn't pay off.
Man. Yeah, I remember these voters and how much they loved her when I was there. And, Trump criticized her. So we cut an ad when Trump went after her because we were like, we just done the focus group there, the couple of focus groups, seen how much people liked her. And we thought, ooh, this might actually be a misstep where Trump is now going after Kim Reynolds. And it wasn't even that Kim Reynolds, at that point, it wasn't even that she endorsed DeSantis. He was going after her because she declined to endorse him, right? And he pays no price, which again, I mean, this is where I think you just keep learning the lesson over and over again. Even me, who talks to voters all the time. Just his durability is something that can still not shock, but still just kind of make you go, wow, there's nothing.
It's very impressive. It's very impressive. The hold that he has and his ability to say things that you think, this was from the get-go. This was from when he first announced that nobody believed, nobody that had a microphone or a TV camera believed that he was going to be successful. And then, because he kept saying things, and what they didn't realize is that's what people wanted to hear. Now, there was a focus group in New Hampshire early on that they were talking about what is it that you like about Donald Trump, and one person said, "Well, he's one of us." And I thought, well, that's very interesting. And the moderator said, "What do you mean?" "He flies on a private jet. He's a billionaire." "What do you mean?" So, well, he talks like us. And this is why, I come back to the focus group and the comfort that people had in saying things that might be considered, difficult. There's something difficult about what they're saying. But that's how they were already thinking and already talking. And Trump gave voice to it.
Yes. And actually, I want to get to kind of as as we wrap here, with another guy who has fallen in the voters' eyes. Vivek Ramaswamy was drawing some interest until people saw the way he debates. Plenty of voters still like him. He and DeSantis got a lot in this group, a lot of second choice mentions, which is, I think, pretty well reflected in your polling. But he's run into a major problem beyond his control. Let's listen.
I'm sorry, I'm not being prejudiced, guys, but I don't like his name. I don't like where he came from. Okay. After 9/11, I still harbor a lot of hard feelings about that.
He was kind of mentioning, some good things. Yeah, I mean, it's okay. I mean, is he Trump? No, but he's okay.
I had somebody call me for Vivek, and that person could not say his last name. But I was like, come on, are you just picking people out of the street or what? Like, you got to be able to say the candidate's name. I'm sorry. I'm in a room with business owners all the time, and I don't know. I don't think he can get in a room with political leaders. I mean, Putin will run right over him, and I don't think it's going to work.
Yeah, I like him. Like, from the comments he's made, it sounds good, but I would also agree where I just feel like Trump has more, if that makes sense.
His name doesn't bother me. His religion doesn't really bother me. Once again, the question becomes for me is, will what they say and what they do match up? And I can't say for any of these guys that it will, save for Trump.
Yeah, he's got a lot of charisma and he's got a lot of energy and he's young. So I mean, that's one thing that I would like to see. But just the way he comes across, I don't know, it kind of rubs me the wrong way.
I think both him and DeSantis, they don't have the fire in the gut that they need right now to make anything happen in 24. But I think they've got 4 years to build on that, because Trump's got like an atomic bomb going off in his gut.
So there's this interesting dynamic in the groups where you do get people who say flat out, as this first gentleman did, I don't like his name. And also something 9/11, where those are sort of gobsmacking moments, but also you hear them enough. Like, I hear people say, well, I don't think a woman should be president. That's actually been pretty oh, it's not like everybody says it, but I hear it like a person in a group. And I also there was someone in this group. It was funny. I often hear someone will say, I don't think a woman can be president. And it is more than half the time it is a woman saying that. Like, I don't trust a woman to be president. And like, there's nods from the group. In this group, the normie Nikki Curious person said, I would love to see a woman president, and everyone else just stared. Like, there was nobody else was like, yeah, that'd be great to see a woman president. And so the Vivek stuff is but like, there's this weird thing where both for Nikki and for Vivek, there is a type of person who likes the fact that Vivek doesn't look like an old white guy. They like that he's sort of a young, different tech, different background from that, like that's cool for them. The same way with Nikki. They think she'll do better because she's a woman, or they like that she's got this immigrant background story. But there is a real other pocket of voters who do not like any of that one bit. and they'll voice it in these groups. And nobody gets mad at them really when they voice it. You hear somebody will not push back, but they'll say like, I don't have a problem with this personally. That's not why I'm not voting for them. But they're not interested in voting for them. But when you say that, well, I guess maybe I don't know if you have an opinion on some of the bad thoughts for people. You already said it. Trump gave a lot of permission for this stuff to come out. I wasn't doing focus groups, and maybe because you have. Do you think Trump changed people, or when you were doing focus groups, because I've only been doing them for the last 3 or 4 years, if you were doing them 10 years ago, did you hear a lot of the stuff that made you go like, ugh? Or do you feel like it's different now?
I feel like it is different now, but it's a matter of degree. It's not an order of magnitude. That it was the culture, conservative culture, was a little more careful, and then sort of Katie bar the door. Whatever you want to say, it's okay to say. Almost. It can feel that way. And somebody can say something that seems inflammatory, and the rest of the group nods and says, I'm with you. And I think that I'm just saying that people used to be maybe a little bit more careful, and then Trump was their voice, and which is what he says all the time. He tells them that I am your voice. I am your retribution. I am the one who's going to make you great again.
Yeah.
And they believe it.
When people say the phrase a lot in the groups, they say, he says what we're all thinking. And what they mean is like the bad stuff that they're thinking. Like he goes ahead and says it. And, you know, it's a tough one, because sometimes I want to go to these people's, some of their defense. Like I want to come to their defense, because I do hear there are plenty of people in the groups who do not, they don't really push back, but they don't, you can tell they want to distance themselves from the more racially motivated or sexist or otherwise terrible comments. And there's a lot of people who disavow Trump's behavior. And so there's part of me that sometimes wants to defend those people. But on the other hand, they're okay with it enough. I mean, they may not personally like behave that way in public. And I will say, as somebody who grew up in conservative circles, it took me a long time. And now these are conservative circles that come from like a college to a think tank, or it took me a long time before I encountered like real racism in the wild from conservatives. And so I would have defended conservatives on this count. But I think I realized, and I was like, you mentioned the ghost of Rick Santorum. I have some ghost of Rick Santorum stories. I traveled with him when he published his book, and Ann Coulter was there, and I remember people, they were like obsessed with Ann Coulter or whatever, but I didn't hear horrible things the way that I hear them now on such a regular basis. So I do think that Trump, there was a way, it doesn't mean it wasn't always there, but there was a way you talked around other people, or I guess in polite society, where you didn't say some of these things that now it's just like fine to say. Like, and also whenever somebody says, I don't want to sound prejudiced, I can guarantee something prejudiced is about to come out of their mouth. Anyway, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think part of that is also in the context of the broader society, that the way things were moving in terms of what we now call woke, that it seemed as though there was a snowball, that there were more and more things you couldn't say. There's more and more sort of paved ways that have been paved for certain types of people, and therefore blocking certain other types of people. That part of this was the social reaction to a lot of policies that were coming out, and people might not agree with the policies, but they didn't feel like they could say something that would sound sexist or racist or whatever. And then, as we can see, that's kind of been broken open.
Yeah.
So that now that they can say, I don't mean to sound racist, but I don't think this is right.
Yeah. Well, when you just say, I don't like his name, I don't like him, I'm sorry, buddy. That one does fall pretty squarely in the racist category. But anyway, so is there anything else? So I don't know if I've asked you all the things. Is there anything that I haven't asked you about Iowa or the caucuses that you really think people are missing or that you'd want to tell people? Because my audience is sophisticated. They listen to a lot of focus groups.
Yeah. Well, you've done a very thorough interview. So I feel like we've paved the way that the Rick Santorum event could happen. We have a black swan again. I'm open for that to happen. I don't know what turnout is going to be like. I've heard a couple of predictions that, it was 180,000 last time. It will break 200,000 and therefore be a new record. So I'll be driving around on caucus night kind of looking for how big are the crowds, what's happening here, to kind of see what's going on.
Well, that boy, it's even when I feel like I absolutely know the outcome, I still find it all very exciting. But I do have to mention there was something at the front that my producer put in. So we were going through your website, and there's all these like fun facts about you on your website. And so I did not mention in your intro that you scored 49 out of 50 in the Camp Lake Hubert riflery competition. And you also won a court case representing yourself against a licensed attorney. Those are amazing things.
Well, those are things I'm proud of. Thank you for bringing them up. And you can see on the wall, one of those framed pictures is of the decision that was handed down, and my Breakfast Club sent a $10 check to the J.N. Selzer Legal Defense Fund. They got a kick out of the whole thing.
That is incredible. I got to tell you, I mean this in all seriousness. There is nothing I like more in the world than somebody who is excellent at the thing that they do. And you are just somebody who is excellent at the thing that you do. I could talk to you forever. But I just want to thank you so much, Ann Selzer, for doing this. We look forward to seeing your final poll before the caucuses. And thanks to all of you for listening to another episode of the Focus Group Podcast. Tune in next week as we preview the New Hampshire primary. Get ready for a lot of Nikki Haley and Chris Christie talk. See you guys next week.